With humans being as fragile as we are, not much prepares you for the violent snap of your body giving way. The shock gets you at first, you fall into a daze, but once the adrenaline fades and you realize you're not as invincible as you once thought. I've never been a stranger to bumps and bruises. I've been active all of my life: football, lacrosse, wrestling. So when you find out that you'd be bedridden for the whole summer, filling your time gets a little bit more complicated. After the initial high of spending all summer with my friends crashed and melted into a puddle of self-pity, I eventually had to pick myself up by my bootstraps, or should I say my hospital-issued walking boot, and get creative. It started with the arrival of my first 3D printer. This enabled me to start a passion project. After figuring out how it works and what I could do with it, I searched and searched for my first big endeavor, sourcing inspiration from my favorite video game series. Finally, after months of trial and error, my dream finally came to fruition and taught me that blessings can find their way even in the dark. My journey began soon after my accident. Not many good things happen when your parents look through your browser history. However, in the midst of my misfortune, I got lucky. Prior to breaking my ankle, I've always been interested in what my parents called nerd culture. Franchises like Star Wars, Halo, Doom all inspire me still to this day, particularly the costuming. The way the designers can tell so much story and the little bumps and bruises and cuts on the armor always sent chills down my spine, especially when masterfully executed. Going back to my point, I'd always Google and search how people built these pieces, and on one fateful night, my mother saw my interest in this and got me my very first 3D printer. Once I received my 3D printer, I was ecstatic. I spent endless amounts of hours looking at things that I could print and make. My friends and family told me to take it slow at the start on small projects. However, when your feet don't work, you got to do the best next option, which is to jump head first. My first challenge was finding the character armor I was going to build. I flipped through countless characters and franchises that inspired me. However, eventually I settled on a suit of armor that resonated most with me. In the Halo franchise, there's a special ops division of military named the ODST, or Orbital Drop Shock Troopers. ODST aren't the strongest soldiers in the game. Typically, you'd see them on the front line getting picked off from enemies so that the military could send in stronger forces. However, what inspires me about them is that they never stop. That's what made them so dangerous, right? It wasn't their physicality, but their mindset that made them so powerful. And at the time of my injury, I felt like the whole world stopped spinning. All my plans were canceled, all my goals shifted. However, just like the ODST that inspired me, I couldn't stop. Being stunted was no excuse. For the sake of time, I won't go into detail about how the armor was built. To condense 7 months of work into 3 minutes felt nearly impossible. 7 months of constant labor, problem solving, and hot glue burns oftentimes felt miserable. But keeping my mind actively engaged overshadowed the gnawing pain of my leg, getting used to 5 inches of metal and 8 screws that my body was actively trying to reject. The time spent working on this project felt like a transitory period of my life. In the beginning, I was extremely depressed and unable to walk. I felt like such a burden to my family, going from being the guy who was saw as strong and independent to holding back tears as my mother helped me off the couch. 7 months later, when all the pieces came together, I found myself walking across the stage at a cosplay convention. I was so anxious before going on stage. I tuned out the nervous thumping of my heart, and inside of my helmet rang the sounds of people cheering, encouraging and motivating me as I walked across the stage and showed my ODST cosplay on full display. At that moment, I knew I did the best that I could with the unfortunate circumstances 7 months earlier. From my dark depression spawned my greatest passion and light in my life. After the initial shock and frustration I experienced from my accident, I knew I couldn't wallow into my depression. I had a choice. I could either submit to it or let my situation control me, or I could grab the wheel and follow my own path. My family knew I needed a creative outlet, and they gave me the match to start the flame, investing in me through giving me my first 3D printer. I had the tools, but I still needed to figure out my plan. So I aimed my sights high and shot for the project I've been dreaming of for years. Creating Halo ODST armor protected me from dwelling on my circumstances, as it protected soldiers from enemy fire. The 7 months spent working on this passion project moved me so that I was capable of evolving, from stumbling to running. This project represented more than hard work and time, but it represented my metamorphosis from a person who would surrender in the face of adversity to a man that finds a way to push forward. On average, a person will break 2 bones in their lifetime. This may make it seem like an insignificant thing, but to me, the snapping of my ankle was more than just a breaking of a bone. The snap was the sound of unforeseen obstacles. The snap was the sound of losing my independence. The snap was the sound of change. I could have submitted to it, letting my situation weather me away like rocks through a turbulent rapid, but I knew I owed it to myself, my family, and my friends to keep fighting. By grabbing my bull by the horns, I used the momentum for change to invest in myself, to invest in a project that lit a spark inside of me to keep creating. Because even when it's dark and the path before you is unseen, with a little bit of patience and fight, your sight will always adjust.